afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hey. Thanks for joining us at our new location over here on Westover campus. We're glad to have you guys today. This is a series of events that we're doing in a community in the next couple of months called Community Nights, and this just happens to be an afternoon. But if you want to come to any of our community nights, I love the postcard on all the chairs. They're all free events, so feel free to come by. Our next community night is Tuesday, March 13th, starting at 7. And Orange Theory Fitness, our next door neighbors, will be joining us to help you get more in the outdoors. So feel free to check out our whole lineup on the postcard. Today we're lucky to have a series of 3 kayak fishing seminars with the North Carolina Kayak Fishing Association, or the NCKFA. First up from 2 to 3 is Mr. Nathan Wiles, and then at 3 we'll have Mark, and then at 4 Jamie Dennison will be joining us. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Nathan.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks. Hey guys. Thank you, Ron. No, I appreciate everybody coming out this afternoon, and welcome to the new store. And I want to thank Ron and Carrie and all the staff here for hosting this event. We do these a lot during the winter time, and sometimes they're hit or miss. Sometimes you have them on really nice days and the attendance is 0 because why? Everybody's on the water fishing. I want to be on the water fishing. If you have it during the snow and ice and things like that, that's what you want. But again, but I do appreciate you guys coming out, and hopefully you'll learn something. I like a lot of interaction with you guys. The better you guys talk or ask questions. If we go over something, you don't quite understand it, we're going to try to break it down as simple as possible for you, and hopefully you'll learn something. Regardless of what some of my friends put on the internet and all about me being a crappie expert, I am not. I am not, but I've been doing it a long time. I grew up with it with my family, my grandparents. I grew up on Bugs Island Lake, or some of you guys know it as Kerr Lake up in Virginia. But I grew up there. I have a passion for it. I was in the boat field most of the time. And about 8 years ago, when the kids were being high school and college and everything, they didn't want to get on the water. They didn't want to spend time with Dad. So my youngest son got into kayak fishing. We actually sold the boat. And what I've actually tried to do is just do the same thing I was doing out of a boat, which is not easy, because in a boat, you turn a switch, you can run 2 miles in a minute, or you can run 10 miles in 10 minutes. It doesn't matter. In a kayak, it's a little bit different. So you kind of have to sharpen your skills a little bit better as a kayak angler, because you can't cover the amount of water. But I still love all kinds of fishing. I do saltwater. We catfish and catfish tournaments and carp fish, and part of the NCKFA is getting people on the water. That's their whole mission. It's not necessarily winning and losing tournaments, but their mission is to grow the sport, grow the business, and by having different seminars at different times, then therefore that's what they want to try to do, is grow it and help people be able to fish for a lot of different species. Okay, how many of you have fished for crappie before, specifically? How many of you have just caught some every now and then? How many of you say crappie? Where are y'all from?
Iowa.
Aha! I knew it. And it's really funny, because every time I do this, I'll talk to somebody about it. They'll say, "You going to do your crappie seminar?" And I'm like, "Well, sometimes if you say crappie, you don't know whether it's good or bad. You know what it is." But we always get in this discussion. I grew up in the South, so I call it crappie. You go into Tennessee, you go into Iowa, it's crappie. Whatever floats your boat. They're the same fish, right? Same ways to catch them. So here's what we're going to cover in the next. I'm going to try to go for about 40, 45 minutes. We'll have a little quick Q&A. Is that good for y'all? Take a break. Here's what we want to look at real quick. A couple bullet points. One, safety we want to talk about quickly. Then we're going to look at the different types of techniques, the rod lengths, and the line weight that's preferred. Now again, this is not in the Bible. It's not set stone. This is guaranteed. This is just what I've learned and what I've figured out. And we'll go talk through some of the reasons, especially up in here with line weight and all, because it does make a difference. But we'll look at the different kinds of fishing. I'm assuming most of you guys at least fish out of a kayak or are going to be fishing out of a kayak. Some of these, I don't think there's a single one up here that you can't do out of a kayak. Every one of these we used to do out of a boat. It's still done on a boat. I still follow the amazing thing, and I'm not the great social media person Carrie can attest to. I'm terrible about videos and pictures. I'd rather fish than try to film. But But it's amazing that I love to follow the websites. If you look online, there's something called spider rigging, crappie fishing on a group for it. And I still follow them today, even though that's all boat. And if you go follow them, a lot of the same information will be talked about. We're going to look at the different kind of baits do you use, artificial, plastic, spoons, spinner baits, crank baits that's out there on the market. And believe me, you look at this table up here, and it looks very complicated. It probably is. It's probably more complicated. I mean, I'm 57 years old, and I grew up with my grandfather and my dad crappie fishing, and believe it or not, I was in my office rearranged. We had some construction going on, and I found 3 of my grandfather's rods. He died 97, I think it was. And believe it or not, all of us spend these high dollar reels and rods and all and everything. And to this day, I've still got 3 of his rods, and guess what they were? And he was one of the best in Virginia. It was 2 Zebco 202s or 303, and not the plastic ones that they got in there. It was the actual aluminum housing. He had the line stripped out. He redid his own line. He had his own rod, but he loved that because he could do a lot of things with it. And then he had one old one Cardinal, old spinning reel, and that's what he used for all the year. And he had 3 or 4 colors. If he went with me fishing that age, he'd roll over in his grave, because back then he used just 3 colors and one technique, and he could outfish me any day of the week. And yet we all have all this, and it's not just crappie, it's bass, it's saltwater fishing, it's a tackle manufacturer, it's a candy store for men and women out there and kayak anglers, okay? So we're going to talk about some of the different options. We also want to look at the different patterns of North Carolina crappie, okay? There are different patterns that you need in different seasons. Although I'll be the first to tell you right now, we're pretty screwed up here in North Carolina right now. You know, the old saying about if you want to see it come to snow or rain and sleet, just wait in North Carolina to change in a few minutes. It's like that. I mean, sometimes it's the weather we had in January and February, which is my favorite time to fish. I'm sorry, but I'm not going out when it's 4 degrees. Okay, I'm getting too old for it. But those kind of patterns and all on a regular, typical year, and what I break it down into quarters is like March, April, May, June, July, and August, September, October, November, and then the last quarter is December, January, February. They all have something in common. It's the same cycle that evolves around, and there's different patterns for each month there, okay? So whatever I say today or whatever we talk about, I don't think it's going to make you a perfect angler or catch as much fish, but at least give you some ideas on where to start. Is that a good deal? Anytime you have a question, just holler and we'll go right at it, okay? First thing is the most important thing we're going to talk about, and I don't care what it is, whatever we talk about, there's nothing more important than this today, and that is safety. Whether you're in a kayak or a boat or whatever it is, when you're in a kayak, please have some form of PFD. I don't care whether this happens to be an Astral PFD, and it's a kind of a full body PFD. Some of us wear inflatables, depending on inflatable. I'm sure everyone knows it's the straps. There's automatic and semi-automatic. There's different pros and cons of each one on the inflatable a lot of times. Sometimes if it goes submerged underwater, it's going over. I don't know about you, but during the summertime a lot, when I get really hot and want to jump in, I've got an inflatable, but it's a manual, and I will jump in and jump back out and get in the water, but I don't take that PFD off, okay? And you can do the same thing to one of these too. So by far, if anybody asks me, hey, what's the most important thing, first thing I need to get when I start kayak fishing, forget the rod, forget the reel, it's the PFD, and make sure it fits. I was with the dad, and I don't see him here, so I don't mind. I'm not going to tell you who it is, but he was looking at a kayak I had for sale, and he was trying to go cheap on everything. And I told him, I said, the first thing you need to do is buy yourself a PFD. And I said, don't chinch on the PFD. If a kid is not comfortable in it, especially children, they're not going to wear it. If an adult is not comfortable, you're not going to wear it. So regardless of whether you go to a full one like this or an inflatable, please make sure you keep it on and have it on. The second thing is, it is a law that you do have to have a sound device, okay? You have to have either a whistle or an air horn on the boat. Most of us will take a whistle just like this that you can pick up. If you come to a lot of the NCKFA tournaments that we have and captain's bags, I don't think we've missed a single year of not having, I can't think of the name, and what is it, Ed, that, Yeah, Sea to Summit donates a bunch of these, and GOPC does as well, to go in captain's bags. So they may not look like a whole lot, but it could end up saving your life, especially when you're falling down in the water or you're down in the water. And then the last thing we're going to look at as far as safety was, which this is Mark Patterson's personal one here. It is a flag or a light on the top. Why is that important? So you can be seen on the water. You don't know, there's been several videos here lately on social media that's not even about kayaks, it's about boaters running over other boaters because they're not paying attention. In a kayak, you're down so low in the water, you got to be seen. So we all at some time, especially if it's a large event, and I'm in a large body of water, it is important to put a flag on there. I don't care if it's an NCKFA flag, I don't care if it's what kind. Oh yeah, we love them, but the point is to have some type of visual device. Yak Attack makes a great one. It's got the orange on it. It's a Viz High Pro, Viz Carbon, whatever the name of it is. But that is a great one. So again, safety number one, agreed? Very good. Let's go right into it. These are the different types of techniques that you could use to catch crappie with, okay? Again, we're talking out of a kayak, okay? Let's take the first one, just regular casting. Nothing special about that. We're just going to take a regular, and people say, well, how do I cast for crappie? What do I look for? There are certain things when you start crappie fishing that you need to look at to find out where do you want to throw. What's one of them? If you were in a kayak in a lake or a pond, a big pond, what would you want to look for?
Brush piles.
Brush piles. If they're sticking up, that's great, but if you got electronics and you can find them submerged, that's even better, right? What else do you look for? If you go to a lake.
Bait fish.
Pardon? Bait fish maybe? What about a dock? You see a dock and it's really, really hot and sunny, and as long as it's got some water under that, a good chance that crappie may be attracted to shade. Does anyone know why crappie hang out with shade, under shade and under docks?
Cooler.
It is cooler, but guess what? They don't have.
A cooling system built in.
Crappies do not have lids. They do not have eyelids. Their eyes are angled at the top like this. So therefore, they are very subject to light and they like to hide. That's why a lot of times it's the temperature and the light they will stay out of. Now, I'm not talking all light. I'm just saying that when it's really, really bright and really hot, up under a dock is a perfect place. What about a tree, a lay-down log or a tree? You see a lay-down log on the water, and especially depending on the time of the year, but if you see a big log that, let's just say it's laying in the bank at this angle here, what does that tell you about the water depth being the ground up there? Or let's do it this way. Let's say the log is laying here because it fell down. If a log is laying this way, where would be the ideal prime place to fish? Up here near the bank? Maybe down below? Down below, okay? And you can tell how deep and where the fish are and how deep that tree is. Look at how big it is. If you see one laying this way, is it kind of deep or shallow? It's shallow, okay? But a lot of times when you're casting, if you just got just like a classic ultralight spinning rod and reel like this, and if you're paddling around and you see an area, a bank of a lay-down tree, and a bass is going to be there as well, especially early in the morning or during the summer, take and make a cast out to that tree. Okay, and let it come down. But remember this, if you're out here, if that tree is, here's the trunk, it fell in the water, here's the tree. If it's sitting down to here and you're out here, okay, and it's really, really hot, where are the fish going to be? Up here or down here? Here. They're in structure. They're just like any other. They like structure. And if you've got, notice what kind of tree it is. If, it could be this big around, and you've got to kind of estimate about where that treetop is. If you've got electronics and fish finders and depth finders, which most crappie fishermen, most kayak fishermen run now anyway, you can find that, and that's where a lot of times, we're going to talk about it in the seasons, but that's where they're going to be, is down there. So when you are casting, don't just cast out and reel back, because if you cast out here and you want to follow that tree, because those fish are going to hang along that log, right? So if you cast out and wind it back, where are you going to be? You're not going to be in the zone. So kind of hop it back. When you make that cast, pull it up a little bit, just twist it, let it fall back down. Maybe let some more line out, but you want to work the entire log from here, from the bank, all the way down to the brush pile, okay? Casting also, we talk about 6 or 7 foot. That's a standard length. I mean, I'm not going to say if you got a 5.5, that's not a big deal. But for casting and all, and crappie specifically, I kind of like a 6 or 7. This is not a 6 or 7. I think this is a 5.5 or something. But the line weight is 4 to 6 pounds. Yes, sir.
No question. I've always wondered when the log's going down like that, how close can you get? Like, are they spooky? Like, can you get vertical on them? Because I have trouble sometimes when I cast at the log, it falls to me and I can't stay close to it.
If this is your tree, again, trunk, tree down here, okay, they're going to be, if they're on that area, and again, if it's warm, if it's really hot, they're going to be the bulk, the deeper they are. Springtime, you can find them up in this area, up between the bank and all, but the biggest thing is, depending on where you want to fish it, you're not going to really spook them. A lot of times, I'll throw that jig, if it's like a little jig we're going to talk about, something like this right here, I'll throw it and land it on the tree and just kind of nudge it, because if you just want it to just trickle right down beside it. But the other key important thing is when you're fishing a tree like this, if it's hot and you know the fish are here, what's wrong with this? Why not put your kayak up this way, and that way when you cast out and you let that sink down, where are you going to be? You're going to be in the zone. And now as you wind it up, guess what you're doing? You're coming up the tree line. So you don't know you can tell a lot of times you'll be on a lake and people are out and they're fishing a prime brush pile or a prime laydown. And you'll see them out over top of the tree in the middle of summer, but they're casting to the bank and they're pulling it back, okay? And they're just staying above the target line. So again, know your temperature, know the time of the year. Just make sure it's better to sit up here and cast out, and that way your line, and you can work the entire log all the way, okay? Casting we're talking about, I like my casting if it's something like this on crappie line. I don't like light, heavy line. And notice here, out of each one of these that we talk about, I've got the recommended, what is normally a recommended length, and the pound line. And you're going to see a pattern here after a couple more. I'm going to ask you, and you see if you recognize a pattern of why light or versus heavy, okay? Second technique is something called spider rigging. Does anyone know what spider rigging is? It is basically what you see set up here on this boat, and that is basically you've got multiple rods. If we wanted to, we actually can put another one here, and I can put another one on that side. Okay, this came out of the boat side from it. Okay, so example, it looks like a big spider. You're out like this. If you've ever seen guys on a lake in a boat fish it, when I fished it in a boat, we would run 12 rods, 10 to 12 rods off of the front, and 6 to 8 rods off of the back in this array, just like this right here that you see here, okay? Now, I can't run. There's two differences. In a kayak, you're only sitting about 1.5 feet above the water. Out of a boat, you really want it to angle down, and you've got a lot more height in there, and therefore, a lot of the guys that crappie fish and spider rig out of a boat, they're running 12, 14, 16-foot rods. Anyone want to understand why they want so much longer length on the rods? What are they trying to do without doing what?
Without casting.
Be way out in front of the boat.
They're trying to get to the fish before the boat comes over and spooks them a little bit, okay? So by you having the longer rods, and when you run a 16-foot rod off of a boat, I'm back to practically covering from where Mark Patterson is now, and if I run 10 rods off of the front, I'm going to have them in a fan, much like this right here. Why? Because whenever people spider rig, especially out of a boat, they're covering a lot of water and a lot of area, square footage, okay? So they're able to vary each rod at different depths. A kayak, you can't run a 16-foot rod. I've tried, believe me. I had to end up selling or practically giving away some of my rods. I can't run a 14-foot rod off of it because this is basically the same setup that I use here. I do have two 10-foot rods, but this one here is one of mine, and it's an 8-foot. But it's spider rigging, and that's exactly what you want to do. You want to get out there, and you want to be able to go to where the fish are, okay? You're going to use a certain type of rod. If you look here, this happens to be an 8-footer, and I'm basically telling you, you can see how limber it is, okay? The whole purpose is that you want it to where when you're actually trolling, that line is pretty much hanging straight down. If I had, this is only an 8, and I'll run 10s off of the front too. But if you had a 12 and a 16, there's no way. This right here would eventually, they're so limber, that it would eventually be sticking into water. The last thing you want to do when you're trolling is have that rod up like this. Why? Or excuse me, when you're spider. Why is it better to have them down like this? And again, this is, you can set any kayak up for 1 or 2 rods only. This, I can actually, in my personal one, I can fish 5. I've got another one that I can set in the middle right here. But why do you not want your rods when you're up in the air like this?
You're closer to
closer to the water, okay? But the wind is going to play a big effect in how you move it. You raise that rod, you want that rod tip about this high off of the water, okay? And if you look on any social media or any website when they talk about crappie fishing and they're talking about spider rigging like this, they're going to be running 12, 14, 16-foot rods off. They're going to be pointing down to the road, at the ground. There may be two guys side by side in a boat up front, and they're trying to push those jigs to where the fish are. Do they have them all at the same level? At the same depth? No. They may not even have, they may have all this rainbow of colors that you see right here. These are just 4 of them, okay? They may have one of each of these on each rod. And not only that, but the guys that get really serious about it, and I'm just taking it serious, but I'm too old to tie knots now. I can barely see how to tie my shoes, much less this 4-pound line. So there's some guys that when they spider rig, not only, hold that, sir. Sure. Not only are they going to have a jig on the bottom, but they're going to come up here, they're going to tie a loop knot, and guess what they're going to put? They're going to put another jig of a different color or even a minnow. They're going to put it, they're going to put it just like that. Because you're getting more baits in the water, and you got different depths. The whole key to crappie fishing is know your depths, okay? You remember me saying a while ago, thank you, remember me saying a while ago that crappies do not do well in sunshine? They have no eyelids. So their eyes are angled more towards up. Okay, they're angled just a little bit on this side here. So when I'm trolling and I'm moving my kayak around at different depths, am I better to be above or below the fish? Yeah, if I'm crappie fishing, and even if I'm jig fishing, if I'm jigging in a hole that is 10 feet down, and I drop a big heavy weight and I'm 15 foot down, I'm below the fish. Can they see it? No, because the only thing they're going to see is from here up. So you're much better off. The rule of thumb is if you're fishing and you're not catching crappie and you're trying to troll or you're trying to jig, vary your depths. You may be too deep. If you've got a fish finder, you can locate exactly where those fish are, right? Everybody would agree? Okay? So you're better to be a little bit above them than below them. Okay, we're going to talk about jigs again. Yes, sir.
Looking at your quarterlies here, June, July, August, hotter, more intense sun, more UV. Do they seem to go down a lot deeper during that time period?
Good point. March, April, May. That's prime. Why? The water's warming up. Pre-spawn, spawning. They're starting to move. Would the fish spawn in 50 feet of water or 2 feet of water? 2 feet of water. Some of them a foot of water. Okay? So this time of the year, they're moving up. Remember, they're coming out. They're just like we are. They're just like humans. In the wintertime, we don't go out of the house. I haven't seen some of my neighbors in 3 months because I don't go out a lot. I'm old. I'm too cold now. And wintertime, everybody stays in. Well, fish the same way. They're going to stay deep. So, but when that water starts warming up and that grass starts growing, we start migrating up some, right? We start getting outside. Same way. Then all of a sudden, they do their spawn thing and they get all and let everything go. And next thing you know, June, July, and August gets here. What does it do? It gets hot and sluggish, doesn't it? What do we do when it's July and August and September here in North Carolina? And God help you if you live in Fayetteville, North Carolina, or Columbia, South Carolina. They're the hottest 2 hellholes on this earth. Okay? And they're hotter than everywhere else. Fayetteville especially, for some reason. And what do the fish do when it gets that hot? Have a cold beer? That's a good thing. They go down deep. They go down deep for cooler water. Okay?
What temperature water do they like?
I'm sorry?
What temperature water?
Oh, gosh, you're getting real technical for me. In all honesty, I think the magic number for fish movement is probably high 60s. Okay? Mid to high 60s. Remember, when that water temperature is really, really down, they're going to stay down. As the water temperature warms, they gradually come up to the warmer temperature. But at the same time, the summers that we have here in North Carolina, when it really bakes and you get into that June, July, and August, that hot water, that first layer of water, those first 8 or 10 feet are going to heat up, especially in smaller lakes. If you got a big lake like Bugs or Jordan or Falls Lake or what else is around here? But any of those that size, you know, the temperature is going to vary. But if you got a shallow lake, if you got a neighborhood lake that may be 10 acres, but it's only 8 or 10 feet, it gets warmer quicker. So they're going to find the shade in that case, and then they're going to find the deepest part because that's usually the colder water, okay? Temperatures, I worry more about temperatures when I surf fish in the Outer Banks in October because I know the red drum are going to start moving in. They don't like 75 and 85 degree water. They like 65 degree and below. And when it starts getting colder, those big reds migrate down from the north, okay? Crappie's the same way, but I'm not that technical with it. You know, I can tell you that I kind of go on months like this, okay, more than anything. And then what you were saying again, September, October, November, that quarter, it starts to flip-flop to come back here. They'll start moving up a little bit. Now it's getting really nice, and that's why a lot of times September and October, you catch bass from the bank. You can catch crappie from the bank. They start moving up, and then as you start getting into dead winter, which is typically December, January, and February here in North Carolina. I'm not saying March is not winter because I consider the early parts of spring. But they're going to go where? When it gets so cold, where are those fish going to go back? Back down deep. That's my favorite time of the year to fish is December, January, and February, okay? Except I'm getting older and it's harder for me to go out when it's 30 degrees, okay? But normally, last year, we were on the water starting January the 1st, and I love deep water spider rigging, just like this. I don't have to do I can layer as many layers as I want to. I got my toboggans on, and I got clothes on, I got gloves on. I bait rods up like this, and me and Mark, I forget Mark, because he ain't going out unless it's over 50. But a couple of other buddies will go out, and we will fish. We fished high rock a lot in the wintertime last year. And you basically look at the water conditions. Don't worry about temperature because wintertime, they're going to be down deep, okay, during that time frame. But look at the color clarity. We're going to talk about the baits in just a minute. And put those if you spider rig, put it down there where you are and let them, and you go to the fish. They don't move around a lot in the wintertime, do they? They're going to find structure. They're going to find a deep V, and you got to take the bait to them. They'll eat. People say, oh, fish don't bite during the wintertime. Keep believing that and sit on the couch. Okay? Yes, sir.
Once you find that magic depth and you caught one, are they all around there, or is that just each one's different? Or are they all stay together?
Crappie are schooling fish.
Okay.
If you can get them to where they school together, you catch one, you're probably going to catch a couple more behind it. Now, that's not to say that you may not catch a freaky one somewhere else. He may be out for a little swim by himself. But if you're in the wintertime, especially in this time of the year, we're getting ready to go into a time when the fish must start moving. Typically this time of the year, I love Falls Lake and Jordan Lake. And then by mid-March, I'm down in the creeks. When I say creeks, I'm trolling water that's 3 foot deep, and I've got the jig heads and the baits. I've got them about a foot off the bottom. In 2 foot of water, we're trolling and catching fish. Why? Because they're starting there. The sunlight's heating that water up, and that's where they're getting ready to pre-spawn and the time and to move into it. Okay, so again, crappie's a schooling fish. Okay, you catch one, you be patient. The other thing, and I was going to do at the end real quick before I get back to this, is some of the do's and don'ts of crappie fishing. If you love it and you got a passion for it, just because you go out one day, don't give up on it and don't catch anything, and you tried all the different things, don't give up on it and say I ain't fishing no more in the winter. Because fish are just like, I was going to say just like women. We got a woman in here. But fish are just like my boss, Mark Patterson, back there. Some days he's a good mood and some days he's terrible, okay? But in all honesty, you can catch them in an hour and come back to the same spot and be nothing. Or you could kill them first thing in the morning for 2 solid hours, one right after another. Minnows, jigs, everything. And your buddies coming over and say, they radio in, hey, I got them over here. They come over here. I ain't caught a thing. You got me all the way over here. They turn on and off like a light switch, okay, especially during this time of the year. Summer's the same way. Spring, they're a lot more active, just like we are in the spring, okay? Any other questions? And we'll get to this here. Let's get back to the different techniques. Shooting docks, that's a good one. If you've got a dock on your property, yes, sir?
I don't want to break the flow there, but what speed are you spider rigging at?
Good question. When you spider rig, and I'm going to show you this right here, what speed? Uh-oh, we got a problem. Houston. Okay. This right here, and I should have clarified this, that's my mistake. When I spider rig, this is what I'm using right here, okay? Not necessarily the bait, but you notice the weight that's up there? That's a 1/2 ounce weight, okay? The whole idea is, you want to know the whole idea behind that weight? What's it designed to do? To keep the bait straight, right? When I'm trolling, and if I've got this thing hanging straight down, wintertime, you're going to have a lot of wind. You're going to have pushing you around. And it's going to push the kayak really, really fast. Or if you got no wind. So a lot of times, if you do not have, come here, if you do not have some weight on that, there's no way you're going to keep a 1/16 of an ounce or an 1/8 of an ounce or 32nd of an ounce jig. It's going to what I call ski, because you're out here, you're moving. This little thing's going to keep riding up. So in part of spider rigging is you put a weight on it, okay? Now if you'll notice, sir, I'm going to ask you again, thank you. If you notice this right here, notice what I've got at the bottom of this weight. It's a little bitty, handy dandy line stopper, okay? See them right here? These things, you put them on. I used to use a little red that had little 4 holes in it. I've got some up here. I'm getting too old. I can't see them things anymore. They're like this big. They're great, but I had to go to these just because I could see them better and they're easier to put on, especially in the early morning. But I will vary my depth of the weight according to how fast I'm going, okay? If it's really, really slow and it's not windy and I'm not being pushed, okay, a lot of times I will raise that weight up. Why? Get it away from the bait, and it allows this to have a little more free action. And how do I raise it up? Heck fire, I just simply grab this little black and raise it up, and now my weight starts right there. If it's blowing me really, line stop, if its wind is really blowing bad and the speed, I may have to pull this down, because the last thing you want is for the weight to be in the zone and this be out of the zone, okay? Again, by using this type of technique, and I've just got this particular one on here, it'll enable you, I don't like it, I'm not going to say you shouldn't go over 1.5 miles an hour, because there's some baits if you fish, there's some baits, you don't mind holding that, do you? There's some baits you fish that you are better off, like I'm a big believer in these little, where'd the little curly tail thing go? I call him swimming minnows, that little bait right there. It's a 2-inch swimming minnow. That's been my favorite forever. Raised Bait and Tackle in Eden's where I started buying them. Okay, and I'm a big believer. But they will go real slow. If I'm going real, real slow, I'll use those swimming minnows, much like, here they are right here. These are swimming minnows, okay? It doesn't take much to make that tail, give that tail a lot of action. The more action you can get on the lure's tail, better off you are. Now, if you're going real slow, these right here, they're called Bobby strollers. They're called 2-inch strollers, okay? It takes a lot to get that tail to wag. So if the current is pushing us, I will switch over to these. Okay, again, that doesn't mean that these aren't going to work, but this takes a lot to go a lot faster. So you kind of watch your speed as well, okay? While we're on that, this particular here, does anyone know what kind of jig head this is? Black and yellow. It's a tube bait. Some people call it an umbrella jig, okay? But it's really a tube bait, and you basically, just like this blue one here, and when it's going through the water, all the little fizzly tails and fingers are going to vibrate as it's being pulled through the water. Some people ask me, when do you use minnows and when do you use jigs? I probably use jigs 90% of the time, but I always carry me about a dozen minnows with me, because you never know, they may want one of the one and not of the other. And everybody heard of people tipping jigs with minnows? When someone is tipping jigs, they're basically taking an artificial jig like this, they're taking a live minnow, a small minnow, hooking him right up under the bottom jaw, just like this, and letting him go, and especially when you're slow, okay? Why? Because that bait may not be jiggling as much, but that live minnow on there will liven it up a little bit. So during the wintertime especially, you need to try 2 or 3 different options on that, okay? Any other questions?
You're using mono, not braid.
Absolutely, and I'll tell you why. When if I'm jigging, you got to remember, crappie have especially in the springtime, you know what a nickname for crappie is? Paper mouth. Why? Because they've got real thin mouths. And when the springtime gets here, it's real tissuey. So if you did too heavy a line or too big a hooks, and you go to set the hook like you are on a huge bass, you're gonna rip you've heard of people ripping the lips off of them. You will tear the sides. They're called paper mouths. You'll tear the sides of the mouth out. Okay, so With that said, it's a lot easier to use the lighter line and the lighter hooks. I prefer the lighter hooks on that, okay?
Depth or speed or?
Okay, depth or speed. Again, that's all going to dictate with the wind, okay? That's just going to be wind driven, and you got to let line out or not line out. Shooting docks is one real quick. I know that's what I was going to go to, so we can get going here. This is my favorite. Shooting a dock means basically I'm sitting in a kayak and I'm down, but I need to get up under that dock. It's only 2 foot off the rail. I'll use an ultralight, like a 5'6", no more than 7 ultralight, which this is, and 4 to 6 pound line. Okay. Have anybody noticed a pattern yet on lines up here? Do I use really heavy line? There's only a couple times I want heavy line, and that's when I'm using slip corks and live bait, and when I am jigging, that goes up to 8 or 10. You know why? Because when you jig, you're usually in brush piles, and when you're in brush piles, you're going to get hung up. And my dad used to hate crappie fishing because he'd get frustrated. Oh, I hung again. I'm quitting. Man, if you're going to get hung up, if you want some big ones, you've got to get down in the brush to get them. Okay, so therefore, the shooting the docks, I want to get up under it, but dock shooting is real simple, okay, and I'm not going to do it in here. Last time I did it, I hooked a sweater on a rack somewhere at another store, but basically all you're doing is I'm releasing the bail, okay, I'm holding it just like this, I'm in a kayak sitting down, I'm taking the jig by the head, do not hold it with the hook, or you'll be going to the emergency room afterwards, okay? Hold it by the head just like this, okay? And all you're going to do is you're sitting in that kayak and you're sitting down low, okay? And you're getting, and the good thing about it is I can shoot that jig anywhere I want to go and I don't have to make long casts. Like a slingshot, exactly right. I'm trying to get that thing in there, okay? And that's called shooting docks, and you can do it. It's really easy out of a kayak. Again, you want to grab it by the head. And the thing is, if you've got a dock that's a 10 by 10, okay, you don't want to be casting up to somebody's private dock and landing it on their sea-doo cover or landing it on their boat seats, and you try to pull it back and it sticks in their seat. That's when you cut the line and run, okay? But there's personal property. They can't stop you from fishing that dock on a public lake. Yeah, that's true. But again, the thing is, make sure that this is just a good way, or even if it's not under dock, if you want to go between two boats, because you know there's fish in there, man, pull that thing back and you can aim this and you can take it anywhere you want. Okay? I'm not going to do it in here, but try it the next time. Use a short rod, ultralight. The more action you have, the longer the distance. You try to do it on a medium heavy bass rod, it ain't going far, okay? Or you're going to hurt yourself. But that's like ultralights, and like I said, that's called dock shooting or between boats. That's a great way to do it. Jigging. When I jig, basically, I've got heavy line. I'm over brush. We're talking about that brush pile at the end of the tree. I'm going to take a jig and a rod, and I'm basically it's going to be a heavier rod. If you look here, 8 to 12 foot, but it's 8 to 10 pound line. Because why? When I'm jigging up and down, my whole idea is to get that jig because those fish are held to that structure, and I'm trying to draw them to it. And when you get hooked, they're going to get wrapped around stuff. And you're going to get hooked. You're going to lose a lure. I think somebody just asked a while ago about the heavy hook or something. The reason the line, I like light hooks. Why? Because on this one here, sir, again, thank you. These are real light wire hooks. And if I get hung up in a brush pile, instead of jerking it, I can actually take it, wrap it around my hand a couple times in my body and pull it. And what will happen to these light wire hooks? They will bend out. And when I do get it back to the boat, I just get my pliers and bend it back. But if you've got a real stiff or an extra stiff hook, you're not going to get it off. Okay, there's all kind of lure like Tennessee, what do they call it? Tennessee plug knocker, which you slide down the line and not. The fact is, I like light line. I like light wire hooks on it. Okay, a 4 pound crappie is probably not going to pull that out because there's too much together, it's floating, but you can actually pull it out of a tree. Okay, but a jig is nothing more than you're actually, again, you're over a brush pile or you're over standing brush or timber or whatever, and all you're doing is just trying to working that up and down.
How far are you pulling? So you moved your rod about a foot there.
Yeah.
So about a foot. that much? Not like
If I know there's a big, I used to sink Christmas trees. My grandfather and I would take everybody's Christmas trees in the neighborhood at Christmas. We'd put them on the front of the boat. We'd take cinder blocks and ski rope and go to the lake during the winter, back when a lot of people didn't fish the winter, and we'd sink them, and they were considered our holes. Nothing that pissed me off more in the world. Come back a month later and somebody's sitting on my hole. Okay, but it's not my hole, and it's the public water. But you know, you always try to, and it depends. If I'm down, people say, well, how do I know I got a jig here? How do I know how deep I am? Well, look, use your rod. Okay, this happens to be I think this happens to be a 6-foot rod. So if I want to jig, usually when I'm jigging, I'm not moving. I'm anchored, right? I'm anchored out, and I'm not moving. So I'm just going to get it out there, and I know that's 6 foot. Well, when I get out, I can also drop it, and I can actually pull it like that. 3, 6, and just let it go down until I get in the zone. If it's 10 foot down, I'm going to go about 9 feet. Remember, I want to be above, not below. And I'm just going to twitch it a little, just raise it up and raise it down a little bit, just so they can see it. Remember, you will have more bites on a crappie as it's fluttering down than you will fluttering anywhere else, okay, on the downfall there. The other thing, trolling and long line, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on because we got just a few more minutes left. But the difference in spider rigging and trolling, people say, well, I'm got my rods out in front. I'm trolling. No, technically you're not trolling. Trolling means you're pulling something behind you. Okay, it's called long lining. You've seen people in kayaks where they'll have the rod and they've got them out here. They'll throw a line out and they'll drag it around like that. Okay, hey, I'm spider rigging. No, you're trolling. Trolling is behind you. It is called pulling. Okay, when I spider rig, I'm pushing jigs. When I'm long lining or trolling, I'm letting them drag behind the boat. That's a great technique. I don't do it as much. I'd rather have it out in front. Why? Because a crappie bite is going to be in the wintertime. Just this little bit right here. You see that, you know something's on it. And I want to be able to see it. That's why I need to recoat them. That's why I got fluorescent green paint on the end of my rod so that I could actually see it during the low light hours there. Do you have a question, sir?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if you could touch on that point for a second.
Okay.
Just touch on a few techniques on that if you're familiar.
On which one?
The pulling.
The pulling. Long lining is basically sometimes they will use long cigar floats when they're like this long. And what they'll basically do is they'll take, much like a cork here. Gotcha. Well, they'll take much like this right here. Okay. They may use a real light line. Light line. Have you noticed out here when I'm trolling or I'm pushing jigs, I want light line. Why? What's it less likely to do than thicker line or heavier line? Float. Okay, you get a 10-pound line, it's a lot thicker, it's going to float, which means it's going to stay on the top more. Okay, same way as what's called long lining or trolling. Some people will take this and just pitch it out, and I've done it before, eating a sandwich or something. I'm like, shoot, I'm tired, let's see what happens. Pitch it out, put it in a rod holder, and hopefully something gets it, okay? But there is a technique for it, and basically you're going to use not so much this kind of cork, but you're using a little bit heavier weights, okay? And you're using what's called a cigar float, and you're letting them things, they may be dragging behind you to the traffic lane out there. You got to be careful with that because if you're in a boating area, you could get cut off. But the idea is to drag them, you're just dragging them instead of actually, you can't see, and the bad thing about it, and the reason I don't do it, and I don't do a lot of it, is because if it's back here, the only way I'm going to see is if I turn around a bite and see that rod bent over. I want it out front to where the slightest little twitch in that end of the rod, I know there's something down there during the wintertime. Last thing is slip corks. Yes, sir.
In the summer, it's different. You said the winter. You said the winter. You see a little dip at the end of the rod.
Yep.
But in the summer,
you remember we talked about the quarters or the cycle repeats itself. Okay, what I consider the same type if I'm trolling, December, January, February is a lot like June, July, and August. Why? They're down deep. Okay, and they're not. The bites are going to be real light. Okay. Remember this: the hotter the weather, the colder the weather, a lot of times they're not active. So I would prefer to go with a lighter, a smaller hook. Instead of a 1/16 ounce, you may go to a 1/32 ounce. They're just not going to chase stuff, right? When the springtime comes, you can throw bigger baits. They're going to chase it. But they're not going to move a lot in the winter, and when it's dead summer, so the pattern between these two, and that's why I got them beside each other, they're very close to the same, whether you're jigging or whatever. One other thing I do want to mention before I go to this, and that has to deal with something that I tried and I'm going to do more of this year when I'm jigging, and that's these. You know what these are? These are little small crappie spoons. They're lightweight, just like a Johnson spoon. Okay? And the good thing about this is when you got a fish down deep, and remember, the eyes are up here, okay, so they see a lot of stuff up. You throw these little light spoons out. Does anyone know what the action of a spoon does? It's like this, right? It kind of flutters down. He can see that flutter. And that's why you want small ones, because if he goes too fast and gets below him, he's going to say, he's not going after it. So try these, and next time you find a brush pile or you're jigging something up and down, don't troll these because they're going to ski. This right here is going to, if I pull them, it's going to ride the top of the water. But the next time you got a stump, a lay down log, or a brush pile and you want to jig something, try these little, you can buy them anywhere you want. They're little bitty, I think they're only like 1/16 or less of an ounce. And when you throw them out there, again, don't throw them out and cast them because you ain't going to hit what you want to hit. These are for jigging. They're called jigging spoons, okay? And just to flutter, count them down. If you know you got to go, most things, unless it's really, really heavy, if you count 1,001, 1,002, 1,003, that's the float of a lot of these right here, the lightweight ones. So if you know you don't have a depth finder and you know you got to go 10 feet, throw it out there or drop it down to your jig pile and count it down. 1,001, 1,000. And as that thing's fluttering down, that's where you're going to get a lot of bites and hits from, especially this, during the wintertime and summertime. Okay? Back to the jigging real quick. This is my favorite. I grew up as a boy, and to this day, if I'm really mad and I'm not catching nothing anywhere else, I'll put a live minnow on that setup right there. I'll throw it up next to a log. I'll throw it up next to a bridge piling. I can set my depth. Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time. Sure. And if you notice here, I've got a bobber stopper somewhere. There's my little red one. I can't use those no more because I can't even see the hole to stick it in. Okay? But that's a stopper you can see. All right? And I've got 2 little small beads and a small cork. This is about as large a cork as I'm going to use. If I'm in a big body of water and I'm fishing a lot of rough water, I'll go bigger cork. If it's calm, I will go to a real small cork, something maybe like this right here. Okay, but if it's a lot of boat traffic, I will go to this right here. And this, nothing better than watching that cork go under. Okay, and it does good. If you're trying to jig, put this out at a certain depth. You jig. If you start catching it at another depth, adjust this up or down with it. Okay, great one for the kids. If you take your kids or grandkids fishing, this is really good. Going into the soft plastic baits that we've got, we've talked about a lot of it, but I can tell you this. We talk about colors and seasons. What's your thinking? Real dirty, muddy water, light or dark colors? Go dark. Dirty water, dark. Clear water, go clear. And for example, and because remember, all it is shadows, right? They're just looking for shadows. And under dirty water, this makes a bigger shadow than something that's transparent like this. Light will go through that, but in dirty water, this is going to create a shadow. And people ask me all the time, hey, what's your favorite colors in the winter? You're looking at them, baby. Right here, that's pumpkin, pink and black. I love that. I love that as an all-time favorite. These are just little swimming minnows, but I always prefer dark colors in dark water. Dirty water, dark colors. When it gets springtime or it's really, really clear, a lot of times I will go the lighter colors. Okay, something transparent, translucent, I guess it's more flashy. Yeah, you get a lot of flash, a lot of white in there. We talked about tube jigs and all, umbrella jigs. These are just some of them that we talked about. These are just different types of soft plastic baits. These are, you can actually tip them with minnows as well. The other kind of, we talked about the spoons a little bit, live minnows, the spinner baits, which I don't have any spinner baits here, but I do have a little small, I don't have any spinner crankbaits, but these are like little beetle spins, and I'll take these off and actually use these sometime when they're active. Dead winter, probably not going to get them. You're not going to cast them out and bring them back, cast them out. But when it gets really, really warm and they start tearing it up, throw these around the banks or whatever, It's a great time for it as well. Any questions?
So the beat spin itself, right?
Do what?
Throw that rig itself. You don't throw the jig by itself.
No, I mean, it's just something for a little flash. Just like there is a bait out there called, you want to know what this is called? Huh? Blakemore lures. It's got a little spinnerbait, just a little blade, a willow blade on the back of it, okay? Roadrunner, okay, by Blakemore, and these are perfect for casting. Okay, I control these right here. Why? Because that flash is going to be there. Do I want to jig with these? Yeah, probably not, because I'm going to get hung up. But this is when you want to throw it out, and if you want to spider rig off of it, you can put this out there, and it kind of attracts fish. Again, this time of the year, March and April, you're going to start seeing fish move up in 2 and 3 foot of water that you can catch a lot of crappie out of a kayak in shallow water there. Okay? Any questions? So, yes, sir.
The hook's protruding from all these baits. Is that intentional, or rather than hide it in there?
Good question. Let me show you something right here. This right here is a Brewer Weedless jig. You can take a little 2-inch jig right here. I'll show you this. You ask a very good question. Most jigs are going to be like this, okay? The hook's just like anything else. A jig, it's going to, when you crappie fish, you're going to get hung up, okay? If you want to go weedless, now this is not quite as big as I'd like, but you see the offset in that hook? I can actually come in, well, I got my glasses on, turn that just like this right here, turn it just like you would a bass hook. It's called Charlie, I think they're Charlie Brewers. They're called sliders. You get the point. There's weedless. Now if I've got that brush pile, guess what I can do? I can pitch that thing down in there, and it's just like anything else. It runs, it's not going to get hung up in the thing. I don't use these as much anymore. I would rather use the lighter, like a lighter jig like this right here with the real light wire, because that way if I get hung up, I can just pull. I don't rear back it up, but I can just pull it lightly. It'll bend, it'll come out. I get it back to the boat, same hook, turn it, I'm good shape. Okay? Yes, sir, Ron.
You ever use I don't mean spider rigging, but an Alabama rig?
No.
Made a small one and Crappie would hit that.
Everybody understand what an Alabama rig is? It's like a lot of questions back and forth with bass and stuff, but it's multiple lures on one. It's like a big spinner bait with multiple lures on that.
Big umbrella.
Hey, Jamie. Yeah, like a big umbrella. Sometimes I'll call these umbrella. Actually, they say umbrella on these. These are some of my favorites that I'll put a minnow behind it. They got these little dancing things, and they're called umbrella tube jigs. And sometimes I talk about people that say, "Oh, you fish an umbrella rig?" Yeah, like this. No, it ain't an umbrella rig. You're talking about the bass. So I guess you could, but I've never done that. I've tied multiple rods on before. Anything else? The weights and all, people ask me about different kind of weights. When you're spider rigging, you've got smaller ones. It kind of depends. If you are going to troll 2 or 3 out in front or spider rig, you got to know if the wind's blowing you, you may have to go to a 1/2 ounce weight, or you go to a, what's next, 4 3/16. That's a quarter. Yeah, 5/16 or something. You go, if it's no wind, you're barely moving, go to a smaller weight. If it's really moving fast, go to a bigger weight. Okay. Last thing I'm going to leave you with, a couple things that let's see here. We talked about being patient, especially during wintertime. If you don't catch, I mean, crappie's a great fish to catch in the winter. Okay, but just because it doesn't get anything in an hour, come back later on. We talked about that. Be respectful of creel limits. I can't emphasize this enough. It's part of being a sportsman. I can't stand to go to boat ramps, and I'll see guys that come out of boat, and they say, I said, how'd y'all do today? We killed them. I said, let me see. And they lope up in a cooler. There'll be 200 crappie in there, and guess what? Ain't a single one of them bigger than your hand. Why? You can't get but one little piece of meat out of that, okay? I am glad. I think Bugs Island and several lakes are starting to have creel limits on fish. I'm for it. Put it 12 inches. I don't care. But that way it prevents people from loading up coolers, so be respectful of that. The last thing, if you do try spider rigging, one thing I would recommend, because you've got these rods out, have you a long handle net. Why? long handle net, if I've got these long rods out here, I don't want that fish to run and start tangling up all my things, so you don't want to wind him in. You want to try to lift up and stick that net, just raise it straight up and down, okay? Just like a little tip, just raise that rod straight up and get that long handle net right up from down under him. Any questions? Yes, sir? I'm sorry?
Any tips for using minnows?
Live minnows, the only time I will troll minnows sometime, I will use them on a bare hook, like on this right here. I use the smallest. Again, if you look at this right here, that is I think that's a size 4, a light wire. But I use a long shank. Why long shank? Because if you got a fish and you're fishing minnows and he catches it, if you got a long shank and you happen not catch him and it goes down his throat a little bit farther, you got something to push on or get your pliers. When people start using those little short shank hooks, they're very difficult to get out. Minnows, basically the time of year, match your minnows with the time of the year. If it's really slow in summer and wintertime, go smaller minnows. If they're really active in the spring and active in the fall, you can upsize another minnow size. But I always like to either hook them right through one eye socket and out the other, or right through one lip over to, it depends on how I'm fishing it. If it's a cork, I go right through the eyes, okay? And it dangles down, that way they can still swim their normal path. If it's on a trolling rod and I'm tipping a jig on top of it, then I'm hooking them from the underneath side so they can fall in line with that standard jig there. Any other questions?
Can you say how you hook them again real quick? The eyes when?
If you're hooking, let's see here. If you've got a regular hook, okay, and you're going to just cork rig it or just a dead minnow on it, or excuse me, not a dead minnow, but a minnow by itself, I always will go in right through one eye socket. I'll hook him sideways. In other words, if it's like this, I'll go in this way and pull it, and that way he can still swim around through the eye socket. If I'm trolling with them, I will actually come underneath and hook it, because if I've got this jig and I want to put a real minnow on there, I will come up under, and that way he's right in line. And the whole purpose is that tail may not be going fast enough here, but with the live action tail, it's going to be a lot more action than that. Okay? Any other questions? Did you learn anything today? Want to waste your time, I hope. Thank you so much. I hope y'all have a great day, and I think you give us, I think about 5 minutes we'll switch it over. Thanks.